I swear that the evidence I will give is the truth, nothing else but the truth. So help me God.
Thank you very much. Is the speaker on or off?
Yes, it's on.
Can it be off? Thank you. Thank you very much for attending. You are here really in terms of Section 107 of the Constitution, which talks about the accountability of vice presidents, ministers, and deputy ministers. One, subject to this Constitution, every vice president, minister, and deputy ministers are accountable collectively and individually to the president for the performance of his or her function. Two, every vice president, minister, or deputy minister must attend parliament and parliamentary committees in order to answer questions concerning matters for which he or she is collectively or individually responsible. That is why we have invited you to come in your capacity as former Minister of Energy. We were just discussing issues pertaining to the solar project, the tendering of it, where the engineers were comfortable with starting with 10, then of course going to 100 they were not. And after that, it was during the GNU that it moved from 10 to 100. And then 2013, it moved from 100 to 300 under your leadership then as Deputy Minister. Unfortunately, you are an engineer. And the question that is before you is, what prompted the executive to override the decision of the engineers from 10 to 300 in your situation and capacity from 100 to 300? The solar project which was there. The background is that 100 is what was agreed, and then there was a bid, there was Jansu, Gwanda, and then a local company, Intratec, and ZTE did not win that, but the history is that they were the ones technically qualified to be able to run this. But then the recommendation from the Zesa Holdings company was that there must be 300 now to accommodate these two. If I'm not mistaken, if I'm wrong, yes, you have a right to come, but I thought planning is done from your department as an enterprise, and then you give the State Procurement Board to then adjudicate. The State Procurement Board only adjudicates in terms of who finally wins. I don't know, am I...
Let me just, allow me just first to make a submission there. The adjudication is done by the state enterprise concerned, in this case ZPC. Zimbabwe Power Company would have done the adjudication, they would have run with the tender, done the adjudication, and then made recommendations to the State Procurement Board, who may also re-adjudicate, agree or disagree with the ZPC. And so the adjudication is done by the state entity concerned. On the other hand, engineers, technocrats, whether they be in the ministry or in the state enterprise concerned, do recommend. They don't decide. They do recommend, and recommendations are heeded. In most cases they are heeded, they are taken on board. Sometimes they're not necessarily taken on board, and that's part of the governance process. So engineers, I wouldn't expect an engineer who may have looked at an issue and come up with what they deem as appropriate, that still is submitted to decision makers who make the decision. Within our governance system, of course, ministry cabinet or a relevant committee or cabinet would make a decision. But the buck doesn't necessarily end with them. They would recommend. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, let me just, so that we stick to facts, I will give you recommendations from the State Procurement Board, which says ZPC Accounting Officer on July 4, 2014, then requested for a special formal tender, SFT, limited tender, amongst the 3 technically compliant bidders. Bidders. So, non-compliance compliant bidders, namely China Jiangsu Corporation Limited, ZT, and Intertrade, Zimbabwe PLC for the 3 times 100 megawatt solar projects. The board instead approved an SFT amongst the 6 original bidders through PBR 0001M of July 31, 2014, and the project scope was as follows. Lot 1, Insukuni, Lot 2, Gwanda, Lot 3, Nyati. There was, however, no justification of limiting the tender to the initial bidders of the 100 megawatt solar plant in view of the fact that the scope had expanded. The request by ZPC to limit the tender to 3 China Jiangsu Corporation, ZTE Corporation, Intertrade, Zimbabwe, was an indication of prior arrangements between the parties to smokescreen competition amongst the 3 companies for the award of the 300 megawatt solar plant sites. You had said you recommend to SPP. These are their comments. What would you say?
I think one needs to follow through the subsequent deliberations by State Procurement Board, because ultimately they agreed with the 3. It may not necessarily have been in that city. This is a process. There would have been an appeal, submission, and I recall that there were meetings with the executive chair at the time, and subsequently State Procurement Board authorized. So if you just pull...
So it is those executive meetings with the chair which in terms of the process is not allowed. At no point should ZPC talk to the State Procurement Board in view of this. Is in violation of Section 30 of the Procurement Act. And the question before you as the Chief Accounting Officer was, why did you not open it to others and only recommend 3? I think this is where we need you to answer. That yes, initially they were the competent ones, but now that there were other, there was another 200 extra to make it 300. Why did you not also invite others?
I pointed out, Mr. Chairman, that one was handling the initial tender. There can be debates about the wisdom or otherwise of that process. Second, there can be debates about, as the tender moved from 100 to 300, should we have retendered? In retendering, run the risk of losing another 12 months? Because, as I said initially, we were short of power. We were load shedding. What would have been the pragmatic or prudent way of...
Yes. From the tenders, how much power have we gained so that we see that we don't lose? Because the fear was we would lose 12 months. So show the country that the decision that we made benefited us in these megawatts of solar. A critical answer from you as an engineer.
I didn't make the decision.
No.
I thought we'd found each other on that score.
No, I agree, but now I'm moving fast because I think we're now getting to the real matters. So allow me, sorry, I might, you're on the fast track, but it's because I'm seeing light now. And the light here is what has been achieved. Through this process that you said was important where you chose 3 companies in terms of alleviating the energy shortages in the country. And you fearing that if you include other companies to tender, 12 months would waste. So show us the benefits of leaving other companies to having these 3 at this point in time in the country.
All right. I think the difference is that the reference is to me as accounting officer. We're dealing here with a system with a leadership, a system where decisions are made not necessarily exclusively by the accounting officer. I admit the accounting officer is part of the process. I might also indicate that yes, in terms of solar per se, public sector solar, there has been minimal movement. But elsewhere, there has been considerable movement.
We're talking about solar.
Yes.
Solar, so how much
has
been solar? How much megawatts have we gained since that time to now? Because I understand that Kariba 7 and 8, we are aware of it. You've done a great job there. I think it helps alleviate. On that side, we are okay. And these are some of the good that has come out of that side. But it is this side that we're talking about. Solar was supposed to come in as also complementary of the other sources of energy. And how much have we achieved? 1 megawatt, 2 megawatt, 3 megawatt. And I know as an engineer, you've got those facts. I'm not an engineer.
Well, in the public domain, the 3 projects have not yet delivered any power, but certainly in the IPP domain, we're having appreciable progress and movement on that score.
So later on when we hear the good news, I think we are more interested in what has not worked. And I think, don't you also think in hindsight, yes, if you had also opened that tender to other companies, instead of limiting it to these 3, a lot more would have been achieved in hindsight. Why did we shut other companies out and believe these 3 were the only ones? And now we are telling you they did nothing.
I think the difference between your submission and your question is that I'm not being seen as part of a process. The buck doesn't necessarily end here. The buck is very much inclusive and ends elsewhere. I do concede that the process could have been different. It's very difficult to say whether there would have been any guarantees in opening it up and whether by today we would have had our expectations fulfilled. It's really speculation at that level.
So now we take it to the next level, which is the deputy minister and the minister who you then report to in terms of your part ends here. We now take it to the deputy minister. Deputy minister, you recommended at the time that there must be 200 megawatts of solar. And the megawatt 200 is not there, and you also were part of the decision making that it must only be limited to 3 companies. You sit in cabinet and executive.
Honorable Chair, deputy ministers do not sit in cabinet.
Don't worry, I'm quite aware of that.
Okay, thank you.
I know that the minister sits in cabinet, and in a normal corporate governance, he will brief his deputy minister and his PEMSEC on what happens and so forth. But I'm going about the constitution, that they are accountable in terms of the running of the ministry. And if I'm not mistaken, the Permanent Secretary reports to the Deputy Minister as well.
Correct.
Correct. So I'm not lost. I think that's where I'm getting to in terms of the functions of the Deputy Minister in the Constitution, that they are accountable to all, to Parliament. From a policy perspective, Engineer Mutezo, you've heard this account, and it was during your time, and the minister then, Mavhaire, is not here. Comrade Mavhaire, he wrote to us, he's somewhere and he couldn't make it, but we still felt that these are institutions of records, and there's no reason why the Deputy Minister cannot also respond to this. So this is an opportunity for you to respond to these particular issues of your tenure in office. 200 megawatt was recommended on top of the 100, and the 3 companies for the 300 were recommended. What would be your response to that?
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Let me start off by apologizing for coming in late. But as you are aware, or as you may be aware, Deputy Minister is exactly Deputy Minister. He is not the final authority, but he is involved in the processes. And as has been alluded to, the merger, I might not have the details now because I don't have access to the documents, and I left government in December 2014. So I'll be relying mainly on my memory. But from the point of view of the ministry, the concern was to increase the power available. So yes, I'm aware that it was generally agreed or decided or recommended that we should try as far as possible increase the amount of power that could be availed through solar, on the understanding that solar could be quicker as well in terms of delivering extra power that the nation needed. Thank you.
But in having to deliver that energy, was the due process supposed to have been ignored? And I think what we have here is a situation where you're an engineer. The recommendation from the technocrats was 100 was actually too much. They wanted to start at 10. And they now moved to 300 without even doing 10, without even doing 20, without even doing the 100. They moved to 300 as a result of your decision at a policy-making view, and also allowing these 3 companies who had bid, and the 2 had not made it, and now they were said to also going into the 300 with nothing ever having been done. What was the wisdom that drove the government from a policy-making point of view to really recommend and come up with such a plan?
Thank you, Chair. Again, like I said, the major consideration was the power blackouts that were happening in the country that everybody was aware of at the time. And as government or as politicians, our concern was to make as much power available as soon as possible. But the ministers are not the accounting officers. And at no time was I aware of ministers saying we should not deal with the work as required by the Procurement Board or the Procurement Act.
I think the issue is the technocrats recommending to the policymakers that it's impossible for us to do this. Why don't we start small and see the progress? And it seems the policymakers then took a decision to override that.
I'm not aware of a difference in view between the policymakers and the technocrats at the time. I'm not aware. I thought it was shared with the technocrats that politically it was desirable to have more power, and economically and from a national point of view it was desirable. And obviously we thought it was possible to go ahead, but the ultimate responsibility was, of course, with the technocrats to make sure that whatever needed to be done in terms of complying was addressed.
Thank you, Chair. And my apologies for coming late. But I wanted to understand from former Deputy Minister, Engineer Mutezo, whether from the 3 companies that we are now expected to deliver 100 each, so that we alleviate the shortages of power, specifically on Intratech, whether as the policymaker himself, he had the confidence that company was able to deliver. Were there any reports or visits from his office to give him the confidence to then say, yes, we can straight jump from 0, we skip 10, we skip 100, we are now at 300, which was now allocated individually to the 3 successful bidders, so to speak, if we are allowed to use that word successful. I just want to know, well, yes, there was the need for more energy, but where were they basing their confidence that, yes, indeed, it was achievable, since there was no record from this, especially with Intratech, we didn't get the evidence to show that they had performed elsewhere. So what was the basis for you as a policymaker to approve that or to agree?
Thank you, Chair. The process of tender evaluation is not done by the policymakers or the ministers. It's done by the technical staff, and we are not even supposed to be privy to those documents in terms of preparation of tender documents. And it's not, it's the duty of the accounting officer, so it's not the duty of the minister. And the minister's responsibility is to try and direct policy in terms of the political thrust and what is expected. But as for tender adjudication and so on, it's not the minister or deputy minister's responsibility to do so. It's just accidental that I happened to be an engineer, but I was not involved in adjudicating the tenders.
I think, Minister, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My supplementary question to the Honorable former Deputy Minister is to do with all these 3 companies. Probably with the fact that he was not part of the cabinet decisions then, because he was a deputy minister. Then most probably, if he can talk to this forum as to whether he had access of being briefed by the Honorable Minister, then was probably, there was never that time that he was briefed. And most probably he can clear to this House whether at any given time, with regard to these 3 companies which had to do with the solar project, the Intratech and all the other 2 companies, was he ever involved at any given junction? So that probably he will make our story short. Did he play any role in these programs, bearing in mind that he was a deputy minister? And if ever he did, which part?
I think, Honorable former Deputy Minister, I see already there's an inconsistency in terms of the PS, who's the Chief Accounting Officer, is very clear in terms of the adjudication done by the enterprise. And the enterprise recommends the State Procurement Board. So we are asking in terms of the recommendation, in terms of Honorable Sanwaka's question. Of course, the final say comes from the State Procurement Board, but the State Procurement Board cannot make a decision without that enterprise recommending. And this is where you now come in, that the recommendations made were they well informed in terms of Intratech's capacity to be able to do that.
Thank you, Chair. The recommendations are not made by the ministers. The State Procurement Board, in terms of its functions, work through the accounting officer or the accounting officers. And it's not the politicians. Politicians are not supposed to be evaluating tenders, because the tenders are supposed to be done by
Okay, Minister, I think let us understand each other so that we are on the same page. You are here in your capacity as a former minister of that. Whether you're a politician, a technocrat, it's neither here or there. But you are a superior in that, and you've got technocrats working with you, whether they're politicians, but there are certain roles that they are giving. And what we're trying to find out from you is, now that it has gone past the chief accounting officer, who's the chief executive, who's the permanent secretary, it comes to you at ministerial level, at political level, if you want to call it. So unless you're saying to me that the president was not supposed to appoint politicians to then become ministers or deputy ministers, it is the prerogative of the president. We are wanting you to respond to the functions that you have as a deputy minister according to the Constitution. And I think this is where we need to understand, us understanding the role of the technocrats, at the same time understanding the powers you have of overriding any decision any subordinate makes, which comes with that office too.
Thank you, Chair. I have no power, or the Deputy Minister has no power to override the decision of the State Procurement Board. And the State Procurement Board is the approving authority in terms of projects.
I think you're not understanding, Minister.
No, I think we are not understanding each other. Let me explain.
Okay, but
Let me explain. What I'm saying is...
No, I don't. If you in case you want to be the chair, you can come and sit in and sit there. I thought it is an inquiry where we want certain information. And what I am saying is that the recommendations are done by the enterprise. And you are part of the enterprise, you're not part of the State Procurement Board. So in those recommendations being done, why did you not look into Intratech's capacity and history in doing these things? This is what the Honourable Member asked. I'm able to differentiate between the State Procurement Board, which are not part of, but I'm able to also hold you accountable to the ministry which you presided over, which also makes recommendations. Unless you are saying the ministry does not make recommendations to the State Procurement Board, then it absolves you.
Thank you, Chair. I think maybe you are not understanding what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the process of tender evaluation and adjudication is the preserve of management.
Okay, thank you. Management under which minister?
Under the relevant minister. But we are not allowed to go into those documents. We are not allowed to go into those documents. They send their recommendations to the State Procurement Board. That's what I'm saying.
The reason why we are asking this is the reason the three companies, with the evidence that we received, became three. It was because the office that you talk about is not allowed to go into that process. It influenced the decision through an appeal by Mr. Wicknell Chivhayo in going to the minister. Unless you don't know the conversation between Mr. Chivhayo and the minister at the time. And this is why these three companies were then selected, because he had lost the first bid. And on the second bid, he then decided to seek help from the minister and other players. And that's how he then got accommodated. And I think this is what we are now asking, that upon that happening, there were other companies which were shut out and said there is no need in inviting any other companies to come through. These ones are good enough. But in evaluating the progress on the ground, nothing ever did. So the question the honorable member is saying, from a capacity point of view, unless you say it is the management that then failed, this is why we're then asking you to be able to apportion the responsibility to certain people, but equally asking you in your position as Deputy Minister.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not privy to the conversation I was not privy to the conversation you're referring to between the minister and others in terms of what you're saying. I was not privy to that.
Did you at any point in time meet Mr. Chivhayo? Because he did mention that he met officials with the minister and ministerial in the relevant offices in which you're working from. Did you at any time interface with them in those offices?
Yeah, we met Mr. Chivhayo and others.
When you met him, what was it? Was it through the request of the minister to then hear what he had to say, or what was the business?
The business was we had requested that we should have 300 megawatts, and that was part of that process. But in terms of the evaluation, that's what I was referring to earlier on.
So in those 300, you then chose this company then to be one of the 300, because clearly I asked you what was your interface with him, what was it about? It was 300, and they happened. His company happens to be part of the 300.
Mr. Chairman, I did not choose him. I did not choose him.
I think it answers it. The fact that you met him and his company was part of the 300, which is against the State Procurement Board's due process of no one ever going anywhere in terms of that. And you equally saying before us that you did not see the list. The management is the one that prepared the list. But you then met with the person who then appeared on the list. What would you say to that?
I think you are paraphrasing my words, Chairman. What I said, I was not involved in choosing, and I still say I was not involved in choosing, because that is the realm of management and the accounting officers.
Okay, but you did meet Mr. Chivhayo?
Yes.
Who's the director of industry?
Yes.
Thank you. Members, Ms. O, yes, sir. Honorable Mzenda, you are one who usually reminds me.
That's for sure.
Okay, Honorable Chief, please.
Thank you, Chairperson. I just want to direct my question first to the PS and to the Deputy Minister. The PS talked about the tender board being a separate entity from the ministry. My question is, what is the reporting structure with regards to tenders, and at what stage is the ministry informed or involved? The second one is on his statement, which said political leadership has a bearing on some of the decisions. What effects did these bearings have on tenders and on any other issues, but especially on this tender of the Gwanda project? You also mentioned, PS, that there's a solar committee. What is the role of this committee, and who makes up this committee, if I heard you correct about the solar committee? And then I think the recommendation from SPB has been talked about, and also Minister Mutezo, but I want to go further, the Honorable Mutezo, to say, are you telling me that you did not have, like any other institution, be it government, be it public, private, monthly briefings or weekly briefings with your minister? And in those meetings, I think I I think, Minister Mutezo, there is a time when the minister would delegate or would send you, not to say you did not have a role to play as a deputy minister. So, in other words, Chairman, we don't need deputy ministers. Thank you.
Can you respond, please?
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I thought I had right up front indicated what the reporting structure is like in terms of the law for tenders. That the state enterprise or the parastatal concern is expected to run its tenders to the point of adjudicating, and as they adjudicate, they send their recommendations straight to the State Procurement Board, not through the ministry. And most of the tenders, ZESA is a huge enterprise, revenues of 60, 70, 80 million dollars a month, $1 billion per year enterprise. Most of the tenders run through that process with no hitches. The ones that we're discussing here, are the exception. And where there are issues, you will sometimes pick from board meeting minutes, or you'll sometimes pick from the grapevine that there is this tender, that there is this issue, or in direct dealings, bilateral meetings that we have with management. It is at that point that we can feed in as ministry, but the reporting structure is very clear. The reporting structure is very clear. I'm not the accounting officer insofar as tenders are concerned, but because I have an oversight role, I then, as necessary and as relevant, ask, intervene, and certainly try and, if there are issues, if there are errors, try and correct any errors that may have occurred. So the reporting, from a legal point of view, the reporting structure is very, very clear.
I think what we must understand is that there is the minister appointed by the president, there is the deputy minister appointed by the president, there is the permanent secretary appointed by the president, there are then boards and management, there are then boards appointed by the minister, and then there is management, which is a result of boards. So for us to sit here and think that it is, management is under the PS, management is under the board, the boards are under the minister. So I just want us to be very clear on that. While we want to showcase and say, but we never interfere, it's impossible. It is impossible. It is impossible through the structure that I'm talking about. And to me, my next question would be, were you ever part of a meeting with Mr. Chivhayo, PS?
No, I wasn't.
You never at any time met Mr. Chivhayo at your offices with the minister or the deputy minister?
I have met Mr. Chivhayo, but I've never been part and parcel of any formal meetings with Mr. Chivhayo.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
PS, is it possible for a client of Mr. Chivhayo to bypass the PS, the deputy minister, straight to the minister? And if that happens, does the minister come back to these people to say this is what is happening?
It is possible, and it does happen. I've been accounting officer for some time. It's possible, and it does happen, depending on the issues at stake and depending on who the minister is. Some will come back to you and say, I've had this meeting, this is the decision that, or this is the decision that I make on this issue. Some will not. So it really depends on who you're dealing with and who the policymaker at that point in time is.
So equally, the minister can equally go directly to management?
Yes, he can.
Thank you. Thank you. And the solar committee?
I don't recall making any reference to a solar committee. There is no solar committee. Okay, fine. Thank you.
Engineer Mutezo.
Thank you, Chair. As I indicated earlier on, and I think that's what the PS has also stated, that the function of tender evaluation, tender adjudication is the function of an officer in the relevant body. In this particular case, it would be the ZPC. And our role as ministers is that of expressing the political will, which was to really increase in power. And from time to time, people might come to request to meet the ministers and or talk to them. And it's not only by Chivhayo that I met or bumped into, but even the other tenors, I think, also came.
So who are those as well? Mr. Chivhayo, who are the
other two companies who I can't recall their names. They're also.
But were they also part of these 300?
Yes, in the effort to get 300 onto the grid, there was more than just the Intratec. But Intratec, of course, is the one that has been talked about a lot. But there were other companies, at least two. And on the weekly briefings that are alluded to by the Honorable Minister, the weekly briefings, when held, would not go into details of tender processes because we were not privy, and we are not supposed to be privy to the adjudication because those go straight to the tender board. So I think it was not expected that we would be briefed with who is winning tender and so on. That would be done by the tender board, which would then announce through the normal processes.
Mr. Chair. I just want to find out from the former Deputy Minister, and if you can honestly answer me, whether there is need, Mr. Chairperson, for Deputy Ministers in some of these ministries.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think that's for me to answer.
No, I think she was clear, honestly. She says, I would like you to be honest as a nationalist.
Honestly.
To say that, is there a role, really, for deputy ministers? Because they, and I think it's just a sincere, genuine question. And I think, because if you have a situation where the deputy minister is appointed by the president, but is not part of any decision making on the ministry, and I think that's where it's emanating from.
Thank you, Chair, but I don't think that's a fair question to me. I think it's a question to all of us. I thank you.
Yes, Honorable Temba.
I heard the former minister said they met the Chivhayo. Probably if you can expatiate as to where they met him and what was the agenda and with who. Maybe if you can go into finer details, because when this Chivhayo came here, he alluded to the fact that he did as well used his political muscle to write letters to the Chief Secretary, so that the Chief Secretary will influence processes with regard to the tenders. And that's when you have to realize that when he was given that allocation, the whole thing went for about 2 years without any project having been done. Then the board later realized that something was supposed to have been done when the former president had been deposed. That's when they started to come to their senses that something was wrong with Mr. Chivhayo. But all along it was business as usual. So probably if you can give us details as to where you met him, probably you can give us more light. Because since you are no longer in the system, probably you have nothing to fear. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I do not speak because I'm no longer in the system. And I never had anything to fear. I was just doing my work then. But as ministers and as politicians, you get guests from would-be tenderers or stakeholders, as it were. And I met Chivhayo in that light. And we are aware that he was interested in solar projects, just like others would come even about other projects that they think are in the ministry and they want to participate in. And that the ministers don't shut their doors to the public who might want to have a chat or tea with them.
I think the question to ZPC on this one, so that I think you've answered it before in that you had direct communication with the minister without the CEO, the chairman, you had direct communication with the minister at any given time pertaining to your work. ZPC. Yeah, I'm asking ZPC Board Chairperson that would you get communication from the minister?
Thank you, Chairman. As Chairman ZPC, I never got any direct instruction from any of the ministers.
So where do your instructions come from? Who gives instructions?
I think, Chairman, maybe you can elaborate what instructions are we getting.
No, just communication. The minister is in charge, and like the PSA, the deputy minister, there's nothing that stops you from picking up the phone and saying, there's this issue here, can you sort out this electricity and so forth? Can you make sure there's enough power? After a cabinet meeting is probably rostered for you not providing enough coal to Wange. I mean, these are the issues that I'm talking about. Weight-related issues.
I think what will probably happen is maybe the minister will contact the managing director. But for me, as chairman, the only communication I think I had from Minister Mavhaire was asking why we had not given him enough notice for the signing ceremony for 1 7 and 8. That's the only time I remember a call coming from the minister. Other than that, no direct instructions about the running of ZPC came from any of the ministers.
You know, it's always good to answer this at first. That yes, a direct communication to the minister pertain to issue A, B, C, D, and then it's done. Because I've asked you 3 times, and then it's only now that you're saying, yes, a direct communication. It's not a crime, it's just a question.
My apologies. My apologies, Chairman.
Yeah, I think it helps us to just answer these questions once, and then we move on. In terms of the board, chairperson, you are here. You are the holding board.
That the ZESA holding chairperson might make an appointment to go and see the minister. But most of the time is with the PS.
Is there at any point in time where this issue was put on the agenda, these tenders and the interested issue, was it ever discussed at the holding board level?
Not as far as I know, Mr. Chairman. This was a ZPC issue, and the ZESA Holdings Board only became involved when we realized that there were problems, and the chairperson, Dr. Murerwa, and Mr. Kajanje did go to Gwanda to assess the progress thereof much later.
PS, the holding board, did it discuss these issues, and if so, what were their recommendations, if you are aware of any?
I wouldn't have expected the Holdings Board to discuss these issues. The ZPC, which is the state entity in question here, has adequate mandate to discuss, resolve, and get on with it. Certainly insofar as tenders are concerned, they can, as a board, simply flag, if a tender is considered material, simply flag it to the Holdings Board to say this decision has been made, or this recommendation has been made to the State Procurement Board. But as I say, scores of tenders are processed by the various entities, and the few that we're discussing are unique in the sense that they certainly have caught the limelight, and there certainly have been issues, but many are resolved and settled, contracts signed, and implementation undertaken thereof. That really is the norm. That is the norm, and it is not possible for ZESA Holdings to consider all the tenders from the 4 subsidiary companies that it has, because then that really would kind of undermine the authority of the subsidiaries on one hand, and on the other, the work would just be so much that they would have to meet very often to go through many of the tenders that are considered. Thank you.
I think being national projects of that magnitude, you have that the holding company to get a report, because the whole point of a board meeting and the subsidiaries chairpersons sit on those boards to report on what the subsidiary is doing. And it would be shocking not to hear that ZPC, as a subsidiary of the holding company, did not even discuss this solar in terms of the progress, since it was a national issue. And certainly it now goes to the next question, which is, so it actually makes sense now that, because now that there's, and I think you need to respond to whether speculation or not on this bundling of these boards to now have one holding company. I'm now saying to myself, if ZPC was not reporting to the holding board, so what information are they going to have? And this is a question which I think we're now moving to the fact that, is this true that there will be one board?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. a decision has been made by Cabinet. I can confirm that the decision entails the dissolution of boards in respect of ZPC, ZETDC, ZENT, and equally PowerTel, and that in the case of PowerTel, matters relating to commercial activities should be merged with ZANET, and matters that relate to communication in respect of generation, transmission, distribution should fall under ZETDC. That decision has been made by Cabinet as reported by the Honourable Minister of Finance a couple of weeks ago. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And how does that fit into your whole structures? I mean, there was that recommendation from you as a ministry, or it was a cabinet decision?
It was a cabinet decision. As you know, or as you may be aware, government is reflecting on all its state enterprises, about 197 of them. And so it's not just the energy sector in respect of power being focused on. It's really across the board. And so the process has been spearheaded by Minister of Finance and not by, as I say, because it's across the board, by Minister of Finance. Hence, the press conference that was held was under the auspices of the Minister responsible for Finance and Economic Development. As to what that means for the Ministry, frankly, we're yet to go into those details. We're waiting, of course, the guidance from OPC in terms of how we move forward. Suffice it to say that certainly the entities involved have been informed at their leadership levels. And as I say, as we speak now, the boards remain in place until we get further guidance. But that decision, I can confirm, has been made by Cabinet. Thank you.
How far in terms of the recommendations, how far in terms of the Gwanda solar project? Because to be honest with you, so much work has been put in, there's a new board, ZPC is not there. It was dealing with this Gwanda project, and as usual in culture, people say we're no longer there. Talk to the people who are there, yet the whole nation was looking for energy to come through. Where are we? That's why we are quite desirous as a committee to say probably before they even leave work tomorrow, what is it that you have done to address the Gwanda solar project, which has been so topical and so controversial? And with all the effort put in, taxpayers' money, sitting down, going there, then the next thing you hear, the board has been dissolved and there's nothing. I must protect the integrity of Parliament and this committee, to be honest with you. And we want now to know that we met here the last time. How far have we gone with the recommendations, Mr. Kajani?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In short, we haven't gone very far from where we were last time.
Why? Why have you not gone far? You came here, the recommendations, money was used, it was not spent to what we all admitted, yes, and you just go back to the offices and just say not much has happened. I mean, who's really, we're going to spend up to tomorrow today until we really find out who's really captured the institution to a point where something so public, where there's information, evidence that money has been spent for nothing being done, and you're telling me you're in the office and you've done nothing about it. You've got a legal advisor, you've got the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission there, you've got ZRP there, and it's business as usual, with so much money having gone. I mean, members, are you hearing this? The last time they came here, they said we had recommended and we could not tell you the recommendations. And now they come before us and say nothing has been done.
Mr. Chairman, can I just try and assist? As a result of the national concern about lack of progress on the preliminary works, the contractor has moved back on site. The last report was that he had cleared 75 hectares of land out of the 200 hectares.
So who's this contractor?
The contractor is Intratrick.
Moved back.
On site, yes.
On site?
Yes.
Okay.
With 6 million.
Okay, continue, proceed.
I was saying, Mr. Chairman, that the contractor has moved back on site, which really was part of the issue.
So,
And
so Mr. Chairman, so that the PS would complement as you respond. PS, are you telling the House and the nation at large that Intratech, the relationship and the working relationship and the progress and all that which we have noticed and observed as a committee, you in your party as the PS for the ministry and the engineers and everyone else, everything is normal with Intratech, nothing is wrong. Is actually moved in just like as if everything is polished. Are you telling this committee that nothing is amiss, it's just business as usual?
To put it differently, would Intratech not have violated any of its conditions to continue trying to implement the project? At which stage do you then say you guys have failed us? At which stage would you tell them they failed you?
I've indicated that as a result of the nationwide concern, and certainly even emanating from this august committee, that the contractor has moved back on site. Unless the contract had been determined, unless the contract had been cancelled, the contractor had every legal right to move back on site. He's moved back on site and is undertaking the work that I described. The work addresses the concerns, some of the concerns that we all had about an advance payment having been made with no work on the ground in terms of preliminary work showing for it. And certainly the clearance of the site is part of that work.
Sorry, Chair.
The clearance of the site is part of that preliminary work. Equally, the clearance of the site results in exposure being reduced, financial exposure being reduced, as was mentioned earlier. I might also add that yes, Intratech is the contracted party, But behind Intratrek, when it comes to the actual work of putting up the power station, lies the technical partner. And I said earlier on that the technical partner is Chint. There's no disputing the capacity of Chint to deliver. And hence, in the determination of, or in the cancelling of this particular contract, all that has to be taken into account. Granted, the face of the contract is Intratrek, but the reality when it comes to delivering on the 100 megawatt power station is Chint. And part of the consideration would have to be, if you determine the contract, what are the chances of the contractor taking legal action, and in the event of him or her taking legal action, what are the chances of the project being delayed by X months or X years. All that has to be inputted in the decision-making process, and it's not a very pleasant situation to be in, but certainly very necessary that sober minds address the pros and cons of taking any particular action. Certainly to me, the extent that the contractor is back on site, we will regain part, if not most, of what advanced, given the fact that the feasibility study has been done at $2.3, if I'm not mistaken, they're about $1 million. The topographical survey has been done, and so on.
Figures we have.
Yes.
Honorable Sam, you wanted to come in, and then Honorable Nega.
Thank you, Chairman. Mine was to do with the fact that Intratek or Shint has gone back to the project. Probably if the PS can explain to the House, or what is the motivation that binds them so much to Intratek against all that which has happened.
And also, thank you, Chair. I just want to find out from the PS that when did they move in, and what is it that they have done so far, besides what we saw when we went there, just a small cabin and some clearance of the space which was done. If you can just explain to us that after the moving in of Intertrek, what is it that they've done? And also, lastly, Chairman, remember Intertrek was or is still involved in some boardroom issues, wrangles. Other people claiming that Chivhayo is no longer part and parcel of the Intertrek. If they can also communicate or advisors whom they are communicating as Intertrek. Thank you.
I think not only that, PS, under oath, what we are hearing now is contrary to what the board member said. Under oath is totally different from the evidence that was given. The Madam Company Secretary was sitting right where the acting board chairperson is, and even said we cannot tell you the recommendations. Government has just cancelled the Guide Road contract, $1 billion, because of non-performance. And to me, you're telling me that the board has resolved that Chivhayo must continue after what you said, after you said most of the information that you heard was new, that he was convicted, he was not supposed to be director of the company, according to the Companies Act. And you said it was new. And you said we shall go and address this. So today, you are dealing with a convicted criminal that you now know. And the Companies Act is clear. And you did nothing to amend that. So is this a country of criminals? That's exactly what you've done. Any criminal can come in and run a company. We gave this information before you, Chairman. Is that not true? Did we not tell you as a convicted criminal? We went through the Companies Act, which clearly says if one is convicted and they've served, they cannot be director of the company. But he is a firm person you are interfacing with. And the Honorable Tim says, what is driving you? What is the motivation of putting this country in the hands of a criminal, a convicted person? And these are state funds. This is time to call the president to come to Parliament and respond to this. It's absurd, unbelievable. This is taxpayers' money, where the whole world sees what is happening. With impunity you go. So what is the difference with the old dispensation members and the new dispensation? Just that you have just gone into overdrive now. Unbelievable, we are shocked. I mean, corruption has gone into overdrive. And Zimbabwe is open for criminals to do business. I think the president must clearly allude to that. Zimbabwe is open for criminals to do business. This is taxpayers' money, and with impunity, you are calm and you get away with it. He's back on site. We had a performance here, which was shown members in terms of what stages he would do. He had failed that. But you still want to say that he's still in line from a contractual point of view. And you're trusting state funds with a convicted criminal. And the president is saying zero tolerance on corruption.
Mr. Chairman, I think the MD wants to say something with regards to this.
I mean, the PS is the chief accounting officer. He just told the ZPC Board chairperson to keep quiet, and he would answer. You are back here. You are back in this house before Parliament next week. We shall not accept a situation where people's money go to waste with corrupt officials. We've never had anything like this before in this country, where Parliament does its role of oversight, and you say you are addressing it. And addressing it is even empowering the criminal more. What is the progress? You told us what you're going to do. Oh, this information is new to us. We don't know. I mean, the state has been captured by criminals. We now don't even know who he is dealing with. Was this decision ministerial? PS, for him to think that the board, Mr. Gajanji. On this one, we are here until tomorrow. Tell us, who you came here before us under oath, told us we're going to address issues, and there will be progress. And the progress was very clear. The government, the $1 billion road network has been totally cancelled. He did not perform according to what you agreed. Where is the company secretary today? Mr. Gashan, you are the board chairperson.
Thank you, Chairman. The company secretaries are away on leave until the 3rd of May.
Did you as a board sit down to deliberate this matter, or it was a directive again? Tell us. In the new dispensation, tell us. Because we want to see the minutes of the board, which say that he must go back. If you have the minutes, we are prepared to wait for you to bring them here. That on this day, the board sat down and resolved that Mr. Chivhayo must go back. Was it a board decision by your board which you chair?
Thank you again, Chairman. As a board, we did not sit for him to go back on site. And despite what we said, following on what we said last time, said that we are in the process of doing something. It so happens that today, the 23rd of April, is one of those timelines that we have to review the...
Thank you. You have answered. The board did not say anything. PS, you told us who made the decision. The board did not.
I certainly did not, and the ministry did not. All I got was information that the contractor was back on site.
From who? The board just said they did not deliberate on him going back.
From management.
Which management?
The ZPC management.
The board is there. The board chairperson says he doesn't know.
Yeah, but the fact of the matter is the site is being cleared.
No, but the point is this. The board did not make a resolution to Chivhayo to go back. The question is, who made the decision? Because once you speak to the board chairperson, he represents management. So we're not going to management from a corporate governance point of view. Now we're coming to you, the chief accounting officer, who narrated this to us. So the decision came from who? The ZPC board has been cleared. From a corporate governance point of view, they did not sit down, they represent management. So who made the decision?
Well, I've indicated, Honorable Chair, that certainly not from the ministry. All I got was information that the site was being cleared.
MD, can you respond? The chairperson is working on another PS and you the MD. And you are very clear under oath. You must remember what you said was under oath.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think what we can say is the contractor moved them to site. But as indicated earlier, because the contract is still subsisting, we could not stop the contractor from executing the work. In any case, it's reducing our liability and the exposure.
The issue is as the contractor complied with the initial contract. That's the issue, the agreement. This is what we're looking at from an oversight point of view. You gave us a timesheet of what he was supposed to do at this point. And clearly he did not do that. And the question is, what are you going to do about it? And you're telling me he's gone again so that you create another work plan and he continues being there. You as an organization dealing with taxpayers' money, what have you done about that agreement?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I indicated, the contract was still subsisting up to today. That's why it has been indicated that today is a decision day. We will review the progress on the contract and then make a decision on the way forward.
But the guy, the contract, the MD, the president just moved in to deal with that contract, even if it was moving because we're not performing. This is where we need to go to agreements. What do they say? At this point, he was supposed to do this. At this point, he was supposed to do this. Why are you allowing the contract to run when before money has been spent, which has not gone into the thing project? Who is he working with? Who is he paying in your institution?
We have already given notification, the due notification, as per the contract terms, the contractor, to say our date for meeting the condition precedent to the contract is the 23rd. So we've given the contractor notice in time. It has been duly set, and today we will then determine the way forward.
And these issues were discussed at board level.
No, the board has been advised of that.
Was this issue discussed at board level? Because we seem to be having in the same occurrence like the last time, where the minister was directly dealing with the managing director, the board not knowing what was going on. That's exactly what is happening. So I'm asking, did the board know about this? Or somebody's giving you directions? And now that you're acting, you feel that you probably don't have the power, you're probably making decisions so that you can be made the thing substantive. Why are you working without the board?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the board and our group CEO are fully seized with the matter. Was given them
copies of the notices that we have given to the contractor. So the activities in the letter.
But how does your organization work?
Can I assist?
Okay, Honorable Udenge.
Maybe the MD can help us. After I went to Gwanda, and after what we saw was published in the media, and the pictures, and all the issues surrounding Chivhayo, what actions did you do immediately after that? Or you just maybe you just ignored everything, and then later on, maybe like what you already said, that you gave the contractor notice, and today is the decision day. But I think we now have more than a month, if I'm not mistaken, from the last time when you went to Gwanda up to today. Because some sort of action should have been done, so that the contractor would not have gone back after what had happened. So maybe if you can just enlighten what really happened, or I mean, did you just ignore, or what motivated the contractor to go back?
Can I?
The answer, I know Mr. Chivhayo will come to you later. We need to deal with these people at their level. Your level is much higher than that. We'll come to you later. And can we also remember, when we went to ZPC, when we went to the power project, you equally said that ZPC was not on the ground, remember? So when did ZPC get out in Chivhayo's back? Because you admitted you had taken over.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think ever since that time it was indicated that we were going to look at it. We got our legal experts to look at it. So we've been looking at the legal options. That's what has led us to this point now. Whereby as per contract, following the provisions of the contract, we've issued the due notice.
When we went to ZPC, to Gwanda, did you not tell us that ZPC was on the ground? Yes or no?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we were on the ground, but we need to explain what it meant that we were on the ground.
Honorable Queen.
What should I explain of it? Anyway, JP, Gwanda, the ownership, Mangoma, Mao. So I commission this customer with Chivhayo. I have to know clear their piece of land. Okay, they didn't share garage pass by now. Whenever you put a quarter by one, I want to go to garage. Could you not say that you actually go to know? Two sponsors. No, she has to learn the panel. Don't go to a man to so look at us
The land ownership, you told us that you had now applied to the Minister of Lands because Chivhayo had failed to pay $15,000. The Minister of Lands was there. They told us that. So now, whose land is it going on to? Because part of the condition was the land would be transferred to him and he would own the land. So whose land is he on? And how far have you gone with the application of the land with the Ministry of Lands? MD.
Mr. Chairman, indeed there's a draft lease agreement which we did with the Minister of Lands, which we have checked with our legal counsel and has gone back to the Minister of Lands. So we are waiting Minister of Lands for the final signature.
So whose land does that belong to? When you're asked in terms of accountability of the funds, who owns the land? Chivhayo doesn't own it, you don't own it. So who owns the land? So where is the state resources going? Mr. Mbiriri, you know better from the local government's point of view. you're within local government. So who owns the land?
The land is owned by the state.
Being owned by the state, who has the state apportioned the land to?
In this case, the state is in the process of leasing the land to ZPC.
So why would you then put money into, what about if the state decides not to? Why would you go and invest in land where you don't have a lease?
There is a prior commitment by Ministry of, as far as I recall, a prior commitment by Ministry of Lands that they would lease the land to, I think it was signed by the Honourable Minister then, that they would lease the land to ZPC. And what we're now contending with are administrative processes and procedures.
But the question emanates from, this was after Chivhayo failed to secure the land. And then you then applied for it. And we are talking about the first move was Chivhayo owned the land. And to me, how could you give money to somebody who has no documentation where they own land? And then you then moved in as a result the same way. That's why we are shocked. Because you realize that Chivhayo was not the person to deal with Intratech. You decided as a company to take over. And we need to be consistent. So you then said, okay, the land is not in his hands and it's not in the company's name. We're now moving in, we've taken over. In taking over, you took the land. Now you're telling us he's back. To whose land? Yes.
Thank you. Sorry, Chairman. And I think about Siri, Baba Mutezo to end out since the route on our punishment, you want to Buddha Panapa, Mutezo Vakaso 2014. Saga, nothing I Ziri Pokwa. I may no more want to say, Chairman. Could one not check our Omar because of what to purpose?
I think, can I also ask you to just excuse us for 3 minutes? The whole, because I think this is a new development, which I think we need to now talk about as members. We'll ask you back. Mr. Mutezo, thank you so much for coming, and we'll call you back in 5 minutes. I think this is a different angle, which we need to now deliberate. It will give you time to also do your research.
Thank you, Chair.
Of contention, like in this case, and that process is actually started. We can actually demonstrate to you, we can actually show you letters that have been written by ZPC and replies that have been received actually from my lawyers are contract. So it's actually happening. Now, the other thing that I want to clarify is, on the issue of Kuti contractor Adzokera, in the first place, the contractor was not expelled from site. What happened was the contractor simply didn't turn out to site, kuzeta basaraki. That's why there was no work done. So, thanks to all the noises that have been made, which is what the PS was trying to allude to, the contractor now is saying, hey, I must do something, because now he sees that, hey, there's just so much oversight all over the place. And he's going back to complete that work. That completion of the work does not necessarily have any influence in this legal process that is started. It does not preclude ZPC should they so decide to cancel the contract. But what we're saying is, work was already paid for, and the contractor did not do the work. And if the contractor comes, akaita work racho already contractor mariedu is one and the same thing. So by him going back to work, he's going back to work. We are losing nothing absolutely by him so doing. It does not legitimize anything. It does not whitewash these previous sins. There is a delay on this contract. Now, what is clear about today's date, which is the 23rd, is the date to terminate the contract. Is the date when the contractor should now, this is the date when we now review and say, right, for what we paid, what was done. And in that case, the process is run is due process. If you act in hasty times, if you act in hasty, you have not acted in good faith. You should have allowed the contractor to. But now everything has been done. So we are all on the same page as far as this is concerned. I really want to assure you on this one. But this is a fact, and we can demonstrate it factually. Thank you.
I think the issue which the committee has, which must respond to, is the non-performance. First of all, from a contractual point of view, it's pretty clear it did not perform. Okay, and not performing, there's also progress in ensuring that the energy, the solar energy, comes in to alleviate the shortage that we have in that. So in that, what are you doing to mitigate that? And your mitigating measures cannot be to still assign somebody who has failed. From a contractual point of view, if you go through your works that you gave us here, which we have, on this day you were supposed to do this, on this day you were supposed to do this, and you did not. So then you're then saying, yes, go back and still do what you're supposed to have done. So Mr. Bill's point was, we now still experiencing energy shortages in the country as a result of the delay. And to me, from a business point of view, the contract is terminated, he compensates, you move on. And I think that's what is critical, because you cannot have a situation, one, we have a situation where there's a misappropriation of funds. There's the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission, which I think is going to come in. These are public funds. Where did they go for the intended purposes? We have not seen anything indicating that. We have not seen anything written to the ZRP to then come to you and say, yes, I think it was a civil arrangement, it's a civil matter, it's not a criminal matter. To me, we have not seen that. Because there is certainly some sort of corruption in this. So to me, what are you doing to also address that on the other side? And this is the assurance that we had received. Writing to the lawyers, we all know that it will take 20, 30 years for a matter to be resolved. But at the same time, people are suffering. If you look at the president's having to sign off this road deal, it's $1 billion road deal. Government is likely to suffer. But it was because they did not perform. So where is that clause in your contract which allows you to get out when things have not been performed? And this is where, from an oversight point of view, your legal mind, where they on duty, they were sleeping. Because what we have with all parastatals, they seem to have a very weak legal framework, which all people do, but parastatals are illegal. Already there is a new structure which the Permanent Secretary was talking about. There is just a holding board. Okay. So they, who's going to take over that? Who can't beat us? I'm not saying that it's another year. My elections are equal. And yet people's money is suffered and we have not dealt with it. This is where the issue is, Mr. Chivhayo, more than anything else.
Yep. I agree with you, Chair. Your concerns have been taken on board fully. I would want to assure you on that. In fact, you are asking to show us, that's what I'm saying, we can actually demonstrate to you that some action has actually been taken. And today is the day. In fact, I'm told, is Chint not in time today?
They apologize, they did not come.
Yeah, because this was actually leading to that process. Look, we've been with you and things have not happened. The preliminary works here is what has happened. And that process, it's a pity, you called us today. Probably if you had called us, next week we would have been telling you something else. But today, the process itself has started already, and today is a very key ominous date on the process.
But to us, we also have the issues of issues of the thing wrangle, which I think Honorable Nengami brought up. It came to you for the first time. The company who owns it. Already there's a matter which clearly the other people showed. But we own the company, he does not own the company. There's the other that he's convicted, and the record is there. And the company's act is very clear. Mr. Chivhayo, would you be the director of ZESA if you're convicted?
No, not at all. But you know what?
So then why are you entertaining one who's convicted?
No, but this is the process I'm talking about. But you know what, Chair? Only last week, those same people had approached me saying that, oh, now we've closed ranks with Chivayo. You know, we are now coming back on board. The same people who came here. Can you believe that?
I think to me, the question that appears from corporate governance point of view, according to the Act, is why are you dealing with somebody convicted? I mean, what due process do you need to follow when the law is pretty clear? When the Act is clear that he cannot be a director of the company? And why are you entertaining that? I mean, the whole world knows he's convicted. We showed it here. The company of the Act is very clear. And you said it was the first time you're hearing this. So how many other convicted people are you working with?
God forbid, we hope not more than Chivhayo. But let me say this, Chair. If you are talking about Chivhayo, if we just check which is convicted, then they will simply remove him and we deal with Intratech. Here now we are dealing with Intratech. Here we are going to be dealing with the company institution Intratech, not the individual Chivhayo. Even Wakambisa, because you would direct a visa. But here we are dealing with Intratech. And as far as Intratech is concerned, some clear steps have been taken, clearly legal steps have been taken. And today is the 23rd when the contract is supposed to run out. Today, the 23rd, what we should be seeing per site is all the work that was paid for done. And it's not done. That's what it is. As I said again, let me just repeat, Intratech had not been fired per site, they had not been expelled per site. They were simply not turning up because they were delinquent. And because of all this outcry and the pressure that you've given, they're back. So to the extent that they do any work that limits the exposure.
Chivhayo and the Intratech vai vatazavasa. Lord Mari yezo vakashanda yaizodhithathwa from total amount yakapiwa then balance yozoka kupi yozoka ukamani ndodaitasiya kaunotaifunga asi panazvo tinongashandisa mafuti chivharana kuda kuti apana izve singosendero zokupi ukamba kuti mukontrakt yako watopedza.
Can I respond to that? Yeah. In fact, like the PS indicated, I think it's done between 75 and 80 hectares out of 200. So which means Basasha now better. So apana zvikuvhara naye papa. You see? So there's still outstanding work, probably in the scale of about 120,000 hectares, so 120 hectares. This is now clear. So it's not. So whatever is left is the exposure. That is what we will demand our money for. Alternatively, what we could have done is against this way, guarantee. And from the guarantee, we would then say, right, guarantee there is so much. Basrawaita now 8 hectares, was 120. Would then cash the guarantee, commensurate 120 hectares. So in that respect, I want to assure the House, Atina, anything, we've not worsened our situation anyway, at all.
Yes.
Through you, Chair, Chivhayo and Intratech. Varushandra Maria Vakajaya, Autoshandra Maruta.
Aiwa, Yavaka. Sorry, Chair. No ways, no, Yavakajga, please. Not yet. I want to make that clear. That's exactly why we said, can I have a site in Gaida? Because he owes us money. Any Basarabuja in Nigeria, recruit exposure issues on the Mariaga Bada way. Thank you.
Okay, I will now invite you continue. You wrote to us and wanted to be before us, and your presentation to the Parliamentary Committee would include the following issues. Number one, problem of ZESA holdings and its subsidiaries. Number two, the debate on the electricity tariff increase in Zimbabwe. Number three, promotion of renewable energy sources in Zimbabwe. Number 4, the need for construction of national grid solar power station in Zimbabwe. Number 5, the effect of 0% salary increase in 5 years in ZPC Holdings Company. Number 6, problems in the fuel and oil energy industry. Number 7, problems at Green Fuels Zimbabwe Ethanol plant. Number 8, urges need for the amendment of ZERA Acts by the Zimbabwe and Zambia governments. We believe as Labour we are an important stakeholder in shaping and reorganizing the energy and power development sector in this new political and economic dispensation. I hope I find you well, and the Secretary General Chikuni is here. Okay, Secretary General, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me say that the reason why we brought to this committee is that we have failed to resolve these issues when we approach management as well as the Minister of Energy, in particular the ministers concerned and the Permanent Secretary here present. So it's not like we enjoy coming here